Very good. Hello, everyone. I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order today, Tuesday, February 18th. It's 4 p.m. And I direct everyone's attention to the agenda. I'll start with the roll call. I'm here, George Savage, Steve Casani.
Here.
All right, Ken Levine.
Here.
Chris Rittler is not here yet, but he should be. So no Chris as of now. Michelle Takai.
Here.
William Urban.
Here.
Mark Weiser. Here. And Chris Rittler is now here. He's in the building. All right, he's here. Fabulous. So the 1 minute delay in arrival is totally fine. Thank you. Okay, that's item one. We're all here and present, and I would like to move to matter number two, oral communications for items not on the agenda. Don't see anyone here apart from Council Member Taylor. Any hands online for anyone who has something not on the agenda they want to talk to us about? I don't see any. Okay, seeing no one. Moving to number three, announcements and presentations. We don't have any today. So we'll move straight ahead to approval of the minutes of the last meeting. The last meeting was January 28th, 2025. I sent all of those to you a few days ago and wonder if I have a motion for approval.
Recommend that under audit status.
Yep.
There's a second paragraph that talks about the table of action items under the internal controls. That's the way it's stated right now. It says that they haven't been addressed. I think they have been addressed, but they won't be addressed in the audit periods to be audited. And there was some confusion about that at the last meeting. So I think we maybe want to rewrite that just for the record.
So how would we change that?
Well, it's the findings from the 2021 audit will still be considered a finding for 21-22, 22-23, but will be addressed in 23-24 because we finally have the staff in place to correct most of the findings.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there will still be findings for this coming audit, financial statements for 21-22. The next year's for 22-23, but will be corrected in 23-24.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that they have been mitigated, but not for the period still to be audited, because we can't go back and change what already happened.
Correct, because they were still in existence for those audited years.
Okay, is there a specific suggestion of the language to use? What would you like it to say? Exactly. Okay.
The 23-24 audit period.
Okay, so new language would be with color-coded boxes assigned to identify whether findings were mitigated during the audit period 23-24 or are still to be cleared. Is that the addition? Does that work for you, Ken?
Yeah, we might want to say that they have been mitigated. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said whether.
They have been, yes.
Okay.
There are a couple that are still outstanding, though. But yeah, but most of them have been mitigated.
Okay, but the color-coded boxes were assigned to identify whether findings were identified. I think the attachment in the last packet, the color-coded boxes shows the status. Here in the minutes, we just mentioned that that table shows the mitigation status. Okay? Which, all right? Okay. Okay, so now I have this, a separate table in the report shows the schedule of findings for the FY 2020-21 Memorandum of Internal Control with color-coded boxes assigned to identify which findings were mitigated during the 23-24 audit period or are still to be declared. All right, do I have a motion to approve with these edits, which I will make after? Second,
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we've got the minutes approved. Thank you for the edit. Take minutes, make a note to myself, remember to fix this. Okay, we'll now move on to new business. And,
Sorry, just a point of order. We have 3 council members participating in this meeting.
Pardon?
There are 3 council members participating in this meeting right now.
Is listening participation? I think, so please do. Yeah, Craig Taylor's here and he's our liaison, so Craig.
And I think that's Rita, yeah? I can't see. So, yeah, Rita, it's okay for council members to listen in, they just can't comment.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yep, you're welcome.
Great, all right. Super, minutes are approved. That's item 4. We'll move to new business. 5A is audit update. And for that, I'd like Tony to give us the audit update.
Okay, so we are still currently in the 21-22 audit. We're about 75-80% done. Still doing some analysis and still information that we're providing to the auditors. But we'll probably have it within the next couple of weeks and hopefully bring it to the Finance Committee for March. Also, just one added item, I do have an announcement to make in regards to one of the items that we've been so far behind on is our local streets and roads report. We did submit 23 and 24. It has been accepted. And the State Controller's Office will be releasing our overdue gas tax funds, about 254,000. So we should either be receiving that by the end of February or the March distribution. But we are current with our local streets and roads report, and this is needed gas tax funds for our road maintenance and repair program. So I just wanted to congratulate the Finance Department and getting caught up with one of the items that were outstanding.
Super, that's great. Any more on the audit update?
No, that's it.
Okay. Any clarifying questions here from the committee before I ask for public comment? Okay, public comment on 5A, audit update. Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, I do see a hand. Phone number ending in 7562. Please identify who you are and let us know your comment.
Great, Caroline Vertonghen. Thank you for taking my comment. Question is, in that budget, 21-22, I believe we had 100,000 K from, what was it called? The coronavirus RPA, is that what it's called? Funds. And that was supposed to be allocated for a study to study the underground utilities. Did we identify that fund and has it been used? Thank you.
Do you know anything about that, Tony?
I will have to look into that because that was way before my time.
Okay, so we'll look into that. The RTA fund for underground utilities.
But it's the ARPA. That
Yeah.
was the ARPA funds, and we do have a fund set aside for it. We received about $1 million, or a little bit over $1 million over 2 years, 500,000 per year. And there were quite a few items identified, mostly PPE, and there was business recovery And I think we used some of the funds for staff retention and education and development. And and for some IT improvements. But I'll have to go back through all the reporting documents to see what it was actually used for.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Other comments on the audit update? Seeing none, I'll hand it back to the committee for any substantive discussion on this. Okay. No real discussion on that right now. We're looking forward to having another audit to review at next month's meeting, a date to be determined. So we can move on to item B, which will be the main topic today, and that is the mid-year budget review. Again, I'll hand it back to Tony for a presentation of the materials that everyone can find in the packet.
Thank you, George. So the results from the first half ending December 31, 2024, general fund has a slight deficit of $8,600. This just goes to show the timely we are with our posting of expenses and revenues. We can come up with some pretty good financial reporting that is relevant and material for the discussion at hand. Revenues came in at 3.84 million and expenses came in at 3.48 million. So revenues are 51.3% of the budget. Looking at planning division, the revenues have already exceeded budget estimates, but building revenues are 30%. Partly due to the beginning of the fiscal year in October and November, we had a meltdown, for lack of a better word, in our building department with our Intergov sites, and due to the separation of a long-term employee and the time it took to find a suitable replacement, there was a significant backlog in building permits, and just permits were not being processed. So that kind of slowed down revenue for the first few months of the fiscal year. Happy to report that those backlogs are being addressed. Permits were being issued. So in the second half of the fiscal year, as the weather dries out, construction activity picks up, inspections going to be picking up as well. So we're anticipating a rebound in building revenues in the second half of the fiscal year. Looking at some of the other categories of our revenue, property taxes are a significant portion of our revenue. Right now, those tax revenues are about 54% of the annual budget. So we're anticipating to reach our budget with the property taxes. I am still doing an analysis of the property tax revenue. I'm actually taking what the assessor's office sends to us on a monthly basis or whenever there is a disbursement, creating a spreadsheet, keeping track of all the different categories that we have for property tax, because it's not just secured, it's unitary, it's unsecured. There's Hopter, so I'll have a matrix of all the different categories, and I'll keep track of the revenue. And according to the assessor, because we are on the teeter plan, it's only for our secured property tax revenue, so we should be getting that full amount. And then all the other categories, it's what they collect during the fiscal year. Now, also during the fiscal year, they do give us adjustments from prior year. And if there's any appeals, that's also reflected in the revenue that we receive. And based on Paula's report on appeals, about 90% of appeals are granted to the applicant who files the appeal. So it's a very small number, but it still has an impact. And then also the other one was the Prop 19. Those are starting to show up this year, where people move into the county or they move into the town from another part of the county. They can transfer their Prop 13 tax base to their new property. So those are items that we're going to keep track of on the property tax side. Sales and use tax. Our sales and use tax is pretty consistent. We don't really have a very large commercial base in the town. So the $350,000 budget is pretty consistent with what we've collected over the past few years. And we anticipate being either at or just below that amount. Utility users tax, we're ahead. We're at 62% of the year. We're still identifying providers who are not assessing the actual 7.5%. So we're notifying them as they come in. But we've been pretty much capturing that information throughout the year. And utility users, UUT should be above the 945 that we projected for the year. Business license tax, although it does seem a little small for the year, these are the new licenses that we've issued since July 1st. The renewals start coming in May and June. So that number is going to pretty much skyrocket come the second half of the second half of the fiscal year. And 125 again is usually around the number that we get. Again, we have a very small commercial base. Most of the business license revenue is coming from contractors. Franchise fees, it's not consistent. Some franchise fees comes in on a monthly basis, some are quarterly, some are annually. For example, PG&E pays franchise fees annually. But we anticipate to be at or above budget by the end of the fiscal year. Fines and forfeitures, it's such a small amount, but we are already ahead of the $2,000. And again, this is money that we receive from the sheriff's deputies when they do their traffic tickets. And so we're at 1,700 of 2,000, but we just received another $800 a couple days ago. So we're above 2,000 for the year. Licenses and permits, again, this is a result of the beginning of the fiscal year with the permits being on a backlog at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we anticipate those to rebound, but we should be at or below that budget amount. Charges for services, we should be at or above budget. Community hall activity has picked up during the year. Also inspection fees should pick up as well. Use of money and property might be a little bit below the budget for the year. Interest earnings are right on track, so we should be okay there. So for the budget, we had 7.48 million. We're at 3.84, so 51.34% of the budget. And we anticipate that revenue should be at or around 7.48 for the year. On the expense side, 3.85 million and 51.5% of the budget. Some of the salary costs are up because there were some one-time separation costs. But we're going into the second half of the fiscal year. We're down 3 FTEs, so the savings from those salary costs should catch up by the end of the fiscal year. Benefits should be significantly below by the end of the fiscal year. Again, not having full-time benefit positions being filled, or they're currently being filled by part-time retired annuitants. We're not paying the benefits costs of those, but they're still in the budget in case we do hire a full-time position. We are currently recruiting for a town engineer and also an engineering tech so that we can keep our permits going. So those two recruitments are still ongoing, and we've just started the recruitment for the town manager or the permanent town manager. So those are 3 positions that are currently being recruited. The building and planning director position is probably going to be something that we're going to look at for filling to the next fiscal year. The current one, Terrence, he still has some hours left, so he can get us through the end of the fiscal year. And he's doing such a great job for us. So we want to keep him around as long as we can. So looking at the different categories, salaries, like I said, we're at 58%, but again, those are padded with some one-time separation costs from employees who did leave. Services, that's our consultant costs and other contract services that are being provided. Right now, we're at 50%. But again, those are items that we're always going to keep an eye on. Obviously, with not having a salaried or a payroll position providing a service, it's being provided by a consultant. So we're going to keep those costs in check or keep monitoring those. But if the service needs to be provided, we have to pay for it. Development, we have about 52,000 budgeted. We're at about 44%. Council made it a priority when I did the revised budget that we wanted to keep developing our staff. We didn't want to take it away. So we have some development money in the budget. But now it's finding the time to send people away to do some training or do some live training or web training. But again, fitting it into what they have to do on a normal day-to-day basis is being a challenge. And it transfers out is about 134,000. We haven't budgeted that yet, or we haven't expensed that yet. That will be done in the second half of the fiscal year as we prepare for the road annual resurfacing project. That's what these funds are for. And that should be coming to council very soon, unless there's been a change. The rest of the report is charts and tables of different categories. And then on page 6 is the fund balance summary. This shows real time up through December 31st, 24, the impact on the fund balance for each of the funds that the town has. And most of the restricted funds, with the exception of Measure A, Measure M, Measure W, and open space, those are primarily interest from or revenue from the interest allocation. We had about $488,000 in interest to allocate for the first 6 months. The open space funds, they had $437,000 in revenue year to date. 219,000 of that is from UUT. 218,000 of that is from the interest allocation. Measure A, Measure M, Measure W, we do receive monthly disbursements for Measure A and Measure W. Measure M, we submit a reimbursement request. We'll have one for the rest of the fiscal year. And then gas tax and art, we do receive a monthly allocation of our MRA, which is SB1, and then we'll be receiving our $254,000 either this month or next month in gas tax, which will help provide more funds for our roads. So we began the year with a 19.4 total beginning fund balance, 1.9 million in the general fund. Factoring in the revenues and expenses, ending balance for the general fund is 1.89 million, but we have a 20.16 million total. So we've had some increases in our other funds due to limited expenses, but increased revenue. So ending fund balance as of December 31st is 20,164,000. And then on page 7, I highlighted the customer deposits fund. These are the deposits the town receives from applicants for their projects. Currently, the cash balance in this fund is approximately 1.2 million. To date, we've received almost 344,500 in deposits, and charges paid total 324,000. And you can see the breakdown: 21,000 for the attorney, 38,500 for the geologist, 38,000 for engineer, 208,000 for planner charges, and then 16,159 is for the construction and demolition deposit refunds. And then we have a separate item for minimal deposit refunds of 1,800. So total expenses is 324,000 in the customer deposit fund compared to 345,000 we received. But we also have a cash balance of 1.2 million. For this fiscal year, nearly half of the total charges paid are from the Stanford project and Woodside Priory. The remaining amount is from residents and also Cal-Am Water for their when they're doing repairs to the pump station. Then included in your packet, I provided the detail line for the general fund revenue by type. So it's property taxes, and it matches to the chart that's in the report. This is just the detail for it. And then the second item is general fund expense by department. And again, it matches to the charts that are in your report. We can go through line by line if we have any specific questions. But this is a nutshell of my report. And this will be what I'll be reporting to council on the 26th. But for today, I really would like some feedback from the finance committee for items I would want to include in my report to the council. So that's my report, and I take it back to the committee for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tony. And just to remind everyone, the format here is we'll have the committee ask clarifying questions, not get into the discussion of what we think of all this. Then we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back and the committee will discuss substantively what's going on. So I'll open with a clarifying question on the property tax component, where it effectively rounding shows 54% of budget in the first half. Is it fair to infer that the second half would have a like amount? In other words, that we may wind up with, say, an extra 6% above forecast for the year, or is that not a fair assumption?
I will receive the second major installment in May. Again, but it's also going to be reflective of what they've actually collected. The secured, we should get what was in the assessed values, the assessor's letter. But the other items, there's the secured supplemental, which is whenever there's if you do a remodel, if it changes the assessment, we receive those on a monthly basis. But then there could also be adjustments and refunds that come through. So I would say we're on track with budget.
Okay, on
And
track with budget, so
on
it's
track with
not
budget.
fair to just double the
Yeah.
amount received.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Other question?
I have a couple of questions. On page 2, you have under expenses, you talk about if we don't have full-time equivalents salaries, that we end up having services expenses. But you also state that the number of FTEs currently have been reduced by 3.
Correct.
In comparison to the budget. Now, this budget we're talking about is the one that was revised back in the fall sometime,
That's the one that was taken to council in November. Yes.
okay, November.
Yeah.
So it's just a few months ago. So did we lose 3 people? Did 3 people leave?
Two
or-
positions were eliminated. But we've also, the town manager separated. We also lost a senior management analyst, and we also lost he was a rec coordinator. So those are 3 positions that were in the process of being, well, 2 left after the budget was adopted in November. So, those numbers were still in the budget, but they're being counted as salary savings and to offset any increase in the consultant cost for the use of the consultant. So for example, the town clerk, we had a person who was the town clerk as on an interim basis. That didn't work out. So now we have Christine, who's on contract, and hopefully have her through the rest of the year. But we are recruiting for the town clerk position as well.
Okay. Also, under the UUT section,
Yes,
you indicated that what this says is that regardless of the rate, the provider assesses 2% of all UUT revenue received is allocated to the open space fund.
correct.
I don't think you mean 2% of the money that we receive, do you?
If we receive revenue from a provider who charged 5.5%,
Uh-huh.
2% would go to the open space, 3.5% would go to general fund.
Not of the revenue received, the rate is 2%. Of the revenue received, it's substantially less.
Exactly. That's why
More, I mean.
and when we see that, we notify them, no, the rate is 7.5%, adjust. And then they come back, and then the next remittance, it'll say 7.5%. And then, but regardless of any UUT we receive, 2% goes to the open space fund.
So they get the full 2%.
They get
even
the full
though-
2%.
Even though we may only get 5.5 or some other number. That's what you're.
Yeah,
trying-
it'll be
that-
less
that's
than
what
the
we're
5.5.
trying to say here.
Yes.
Okay, you might want to look at the actual wording when, before it goes to council.
Okay.
I'm sorry, why is that? Why did they get their share first?
Good question.
Cause that's been the practice. I mean, there's two rates. And if a lot of times the UT providers, they farm this out. They'll look on our website. They don't read the whole ordinance. They'll just see the first paragraph that said 5% or 4.5% whenever we had the 1% reduction in, it was applied to the general fund. But the ordinance also said 2% goes to open space. So regardless of the amount that we receive, 2% goes to the open space fund. So even if we get a check for 5%, 3.5% goes to the general fund, 2% goes to the open space. We don't prorate it.
Okay, and
I don't have authority to do that.
okay, so.
And the
on-
voters have stated, they have always held up the 2% for open space. So that's been validated, and
And that's the only one that has the specific.
that's the only one that has the
call-out,
specific
And that's why it
component, yeah.
goes there. Okay.
So, thank you for the breakdown between energy, telephone, and water for the UUT. Telephone's quite small.
Yes.
Does that mean that cell phones are not included in this?
That, well, we've said in the past that our UUT language needs to be modernized. If that's the word.
Well,
It's, I mean, we're still referring to telephone instead of telecommunication. So
Um,
yeah, and the ordinance was passed in the 1980s and it hasn't been updated since.
So the answer is that cell phone services are not.
Well, we do receive UUT from cell phone providers.
Oh, we do.
We do.
Back in ancient history again, I think the city of Palo Alto, there was a lawsuit about cell phones, and personally, I have a family plan and not all members of my family live in Portola Valley. Anyway, there was a lawsuit maybe 10, 15 years ago, and saying that there shouldn't be a utility users tax on cell phone services. And since then, I personally haven't been charged for it. The council, the Portola Valley Council decided to go along since there was already this lawsuit in Palo Alto, I believe. So since then, at least on my cell phone bill, I've not gotten the UUT charge. I don't know who else is charging, but, and I think
We-
they won the lawsuit, whoever,
It's a very small amount. I mean, it's a number of providers. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
we'll get a check for 72 cents or $5, and there's a very small amount, but there's a large number of about 11 or 12 of each month that we get, and it's for telephone or it's for our telephone UUT. But the checks are very, very small. The large number of checks are water, PG&E, and those are the large number of checks that we get. But the telephone ones are very small, very incremental. Like I said, they're for very, very, very small dollar amounts. But our UUT ordinance the language needs to be brought up to current times.
The last question I have relates to the fund balances.
Yep.
You've listed the assigned balances,
Yes.
and those numbers that are there, this committee used to set those numbers in conjunction with the staff. And I don't recall these detailed numbers. I take it these have been adjusted over the last few years or over the last year as you reset and learn of our financial situation.
Correct. And these were the numbers that were from the 2021 audit. So yeah, the numbers haven't been updated. We will be updating the OPEB number. We just did evaluation for 22. There were some assumptions there was 3 people in there that shouldn't have been in there. Also, we also put money into a trust. So now we actually have more money in the trust than what our OPEB valuation is going to be. So that's going to be an adjustment for 21, 22. So that's going to impact that number. In fact, that'll release that number that we have for OPEB because we now have a trust that covers the liability. So, but yeah, we'll adjust these numbers as we get through the audit numbers and also for the budget as well. It'll be a process during the budget that we will look at this as well.
And what is the UAL?
That's our unfunded actuarial liability. That's our pension liability.
That's the pension.
Yeah.
So, and that is as of
That's the pension
21, 20,
liability, yeah.
and that is as of 21, 22,
Yes.
come down, right? It used to be fairly large, I thought, no?
It should be coming down. Like we said, we don't have a large staff, so, and we have more staff in Pepra, which is the new tier that went into effect 2013, whereas opposed to Classic, we only have 3 Classic employees left. The rest are on Pepra. So Pepra, the costs are more 50-50. Whereas in the Classic members, the town is bearing more of the cost for the pension.
So the last couple of things I wanted to say was, first of all, that this is a very nice report that I've never seen before in my many years on this committee.
Thank you.
So that's very nice to see this kind of information. I also believe this is true, that we've never budgeted by quarter or by half a year. And so we just have one number to compare this to, which is an annual number. And the assumption here is, even when looking at percentages, that the quarters are pretty much equal.
Yeah.
Or at least the halves are equal, I guess. And that's an assumption which we don't know how accurate it is or not until we look at this report again at the end of the year.
Right. So I mean, for me, this is my first year managing this budget and still getting an understanding of how the revenue flows in, but our expenses are pretty much, we have 2 pay periods a month, and, you know, we have our monthly bills for utilities and phone, and, you know, so those are pretty consistent month to month. It's just the revenue coming in, you know, you have the one-time revenue like the gas tax, or it's just property tax, especially with the transfer tax. If it's a good month, we get a big check. If it's not a good month, we get a small check, you know, so that it's not a consistent amount every month, or it's not even an amount every month. So this process I'm going through right now is just identifying how the revenue flows into the town and the expenses going out. So that's going to give me a better idea to developing the 25-26 budget.
Thank you.
Kind of related, excuse me, related to that point on timing, the liability insurance bonds, I assume that was one payment that was.
That's
made
the
for
first of the year. Yeah,
And it's done for the year.
it's done for the year. Yeah.
Any issue with insurance rates that are affecting town?
Not at the moment. But I mean, we're still going to face the same challenges that homeowners are going to get with the insurance. But we're part of a pool, so at least we're sharing the pain and sharing the gain.
I just have one comment and one question. So my first comment is related to what Ken said, which is really, this is an excellent amount of detail, and from my perspective, it's impressive. So thank you to you and your team. That's the comment. The question that's related is, we've talked about before, and I personally think that the biggest risk to completing the audits that we have in backlog and trying to get to August of 2025 being fully caught up is you and your team having the resources and in order, the time and the resources to do it. You've talked about some turnover among the town staff. How are you and your team doing in this process? Just to give us an indication as to how to think about between here and August 2025 in terms of the likelihood of getting to completion.
So the staff that I have in finance, they're all relatively new. They're all within the last couple of years. We're still learning the OpenGov system. You know, a lot of this information I'm pulling from OpenGov, but I'm reconfiguring into a format that's the user can understand. But, you know, I have not had there's been no turnover in the finance department. I'm committed to not having that happen. But I mean, you know, I can't predict the future. But I think we're suited to get this done. I think we can have 23, 24 done, by August. And because the auditor's gonna break out between March and August, and that we can get significant work done in those months. But I'm also gonna be, you know, budget, fee schedule, you know, so I mean, it's my time management is what needs to be managed. But I think we're capable of doing it, especially the audits. I think we can get that done by August.
Tony, I just have one question on your fund balances on page 6. Remind me again why we can't spend all the COPS reserve, which is like 500,000. I thought at one time we did, but
I mean, we can, but I mean, there's for specific public safety purposes. The thing is, we can't use these funds to supplant what we spend in the general fund.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
It means we can't use these funds to replace what we're spending in the general fund. We can't do that on a consistent basis.
Really?
Yeah, so the COPS is a grant, it's grant money. We can use it for frontline services, but not all frontline services. We can use it for some. We can use it for, if we wanted to do the sheriff's substation, these funds could be made available for that purpose. And this, the public safety sales tax, again, that's to support frontline services. But the key is these can't supplant the general, because there's a maintenance of effort that we have to have from our general fund for public safety, and we can't use these funds to supplant that maintenance of effort. I don't make the rules. These are just the rules.
I still remember when we used to get 100,000 and our sheriff's contract was 100,000, and then the funding went down, or the contract probably went up, and the finance committee went crazy. I still remember that. So I thought, again, this is obviously really ancient history. I thought we used to, whatever the grant was, I thought we used to apply it to the contract. I thought, again,
Well,
it's 10, 20 years ago.
We do,
But not,
but not all of it, because I mean, it's not all for that purpose. There are certain things that we have to abide by in order to get the grant.
Yeah, my recollection was we used more of it for additional patrols,
Mm.
traffic enforcement, that sort of thing.
yeah, but that's all part of the contract though, isn't it?
I don't know.
If it's identified in the contract, then there's a maintenance of effort that general fund has to be used first. And then we can use these other funds to pick up the difference. But if we had additional services applied into the contract, then we can use these funds for additional services.
Do we word our contract in a more,
I-
no? you don't think-
I'm not going to negotiate the contract here, but I mean,
I'm
it's
just saying that's still, $500,000.
right, but we also have other obligations. We do want to do a new substation. And we've identified space in the front of the building, in the front of town hall for that to happen. But we're just waiting for what happens next month.
Okay.
A couple things. Throughout the year, we occasionally will calculate the reserve policy, what our general fund reserves are relative to annual planned budgeted expenditures. I was trying to make an estimate or do a calculation of that from the data here. I think your page, I'm not sure which page was, page 9, you show a general fund balance at halfway through the year of 1.89 million, I think was the number, correct? That's the general fund balance. And the budgeted full year expenditures, I don't know, I think they're around 11 million. If I took the numbers on page 10, what's already been budgeted and then what's left. Am I correct about that? It's around 11 million
No,
total?
general fund is 7.48 million. for revenue. And it
Budgeted
is
expenditures for the full year.
our, yeah, it's a balanced budget. So it's 7.48 million revenues and expenses total.
So the budget expenditures for the full year are about 7.4.
Right. So we've spent 3.84 against a budget of 7.48, leaving a budget balance available of 3.63.
Okay, so if I was to calculate, the way we calculate the general fund reserve, I would take the general fund balance of 1.896 million and divide it by the 7.48
Correct.
million. And what number would I get? About 24, 20, something like 25, 26%.
25.4.
Okay. So, last, some 6 months ago, we talked about reserve policy, and our current reserve policy, unless it was changed,
Hasn't changed.
was 60% of budget expenditures. And we talked back then about the reality that, you know, based on where we knew we were going to dip below that. And one of the things this committee was asked to do was to look at the reserve policy and make a proposal on that and, you know, defend it and so forth. And we did that. I don't know what happened with that or if the council needed or intended to do anything with it, but to my knowledge, we didn't formally in any fashion change the reserve policy. So at the current time, we're, quote, in violation of our reserve policy. And I think with the current policy, we're going to be in violation 6 months from now and probably 2 or 3 years from now.
Correct.
My question is really kind of to all of us is, so what? What is the purpose of the reserve policy? Is it to provide a signal to the community or to us about whether our finances are in line? Is it a call to action? And for what kind of action? We did have a subcommittee report here that addressed these things, but I'd like to know where we're going to go with that, because we're going to be in this, we're going to have a calculation like this. It's going to be in the, you know, low to mid 20s for some time.
Yeah.
And maybe the issue is it doesn't matter, but we ought to be testing ourselves against the reserve policies we set for ourselves. I'd be interested in your comments and thoughts on where we go from here with that.
And I would just like to request that we hold this until after all the clarifying questions, then we hear from the public and then we
Oh, my apologies. Yeah.
reserve.
Okay, so
Because
let me
that's
ask my
an
other
important
question then, if I could. On page 8, you showed the use of property line item interest of about 72,000. That is the general fund component of the interest use of property only, correct?
Correct.
The much bigger piece of the use of money goes to the various restricted and
Yes.
funds.
Yes. So
Okay.
of the 480,000 or 488,000 that was earned in the 6 months, 218,000 went to the open space fund, 120,000 went to the inclusionary fund, because those two funds alone are over 50% of our portfolio.
Yes, and those funds do not have their own established individualized account numbers at the financial institutions. That is a commingled,
It's
they're
all part of the
commingled
pool.
in a single account, and
Yes,
you through the software do the proper allocation based
Correct.
on the balances.
based
that
on
exist.
their average cash balance during the 6 months.
Okay, thanks.
Any other clarifying questions before we go to open comment?
Tony, one simple clarifying question. You said we have not updated the funds since 21, 22. Does that mean the categories?
The assigned categories,
Yeah.
those are the numbers based on 21, 22. We have not changed the allocation to assigned from fund balance. And in order to change it, I'm going to need council direction to do that.
So I still don't understand. We haven't.
So
changed-
GASB 54
Yeah.
requires that fund balance be, there's assigned, unassigned, and it's adopted each year by council that we're going to dedicate X amount of reserve for this purpose or for that purpose. So the council has done UAL, which is our pensions, OPEB, for equipment replacement, capital replacement, emergency, legal contingency, and OPEB liability. And so in order for our financial statements to be compliant with GASB, we have to designate our fund balance reserve in unassigned and assigned portions or delegated for this. So these numbers are based on the balances that were of 2021, but I have prorated them based on the percentages that they were allocated because the reserve was higher.
Right.
So these numbers are prorated based on the numbers from 21, 22.
So is there a future action to update
Yes.
the assigned, unassigned?
Yes, so in
allocations?
21, 22, if our UAL liability changes or if our OPEB liability changes, then those numbers will be adjusted. And then the rest, so if X percentage is assigned, we're going to stay within the percentage, but we're going to allocate it between these 5 categories under assigned. And then the remainder amount is going to be unassigned, unless council says, no, we want to move this to unassigned, which then creates more flexibility for spending in the budget.
So when will that action occur? At the end of the audits?
Well, for 21, 22, when we have the financial statements.
Right, you've
then
got that.
We'll adjust that then. And then for 22, 23, we'll adjust it again. 23, 24, we'll adjust it again. But long-term, once we're complete and caught up with our audits, as we're doing our budget, as we're developing our budget, part of the process is council will be reviewing the fund balance designations and making adjustments as we adopt the budget.
Right.
That's the long-term goal.
Right. So to summarize all that, what I believe I heard is we will, once we complete all the audits, once we're current on
Yep.
all the audits, then we will adjust.
Right. But I'll keep a running, I'm going to keep a
Allocations.
running balance.
Yeah, you're keeping a running balance. I get that.
Yeah.
But to me, there's a decision that town council has to make at some point. to
Absolutely.
Adjust that, right?
That's GASB 54.
And right now, you
yeah.
just put that on hold pending completion of these audits.
Right.
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 Okay. All right. All right. Thank
Because
you.
if I left them as is, we would have, our assigned amount would be greater than our unassigned amount. So we would be showing a negative fund balance.
Right.
So, and I
Yeah.
don't, want and that's not true.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that. And by the way, I'll repeat what other people said. Fantastic reports. Thank you to
Thank
you and your team for compiling all this. I can imagine it was a lot of work. It's great transparency into finances.
thank you.
Any more questions up here? Okay, we'll open it to the public, and Dave Cardinal, you've had your hand up, so you go first.
Great, thanks. A few comments. First of all, it's great you have nameplates. Literally, I was shopping as late as last night on Amazon to see what it would cost me to buy you all nameplates. So I'm staggered by that. Second, I do think the report from Tony is amazing and not something we've gotten before. So I want to echo Ken and others who've said it's great. Third, on UUT, I looked at my AT&T bill just now. We spend maybe $200 a month on it, and I don't see any evidence of a UUT. And if we assume the average family of 1,700 people, 1,700 families in PV spends, let's say, $100 a month on something related to this, that's $200,000 a year in revenue that we may not be getting. So whether it's worth a subcommittee or I don't know, like a hunt or something, I think that's a big deal that, and maybe we have to update in the ordinance, but that I would think would be a high priority. Most importantly, as an early proponent of employee development, I'm glad it was put in the budget. It's always easy to make an excuse to not allow employees for time off to do that, or not time off really, but time for development. But in fairness, we suck at retaining and employing new people. So I think it should be a priority, whether it's from the town council or the finance committee or whatever, that we need to make sure whatever job they're doing, they can take a week or two off for their development. Or like, I don't know, why would people want to work here? So I'm a huge fan of sorting that out. And I get why Tony's job is hard. So maybe he needs direction from the town council. And so those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And Caroline Vertonghen, I think you're next.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. It's very helpful. And I know you put a lot of work in, so thanks again. I will not repeat Mr. Cardinal's comment, but yes, I was wondering about the UT revenue. It seems very low. Secondly, I wanted to know when the deadline is that committees have to put their budget in. I noticed that my committee, BPTS, is not mentioned in your report. We used to have $500 allocated. So if you can let us know when the deadline is. And then thirdly, I'm wondering if the town is also getting revenue from the encroachment permits. That's the right of way. And where I could see that, would that be under construction permits or building permits? Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. And should we hear from everyone and then have you comment, or do you want to comment?
Yeah, let's hear from everyone.
Okay, we'll hear from everyone first. Rita, I think you're next.
Well, thank you for taking my comment. And of course, I keep harping on the cost of contractors, and still I'm just shocked at our planning contractors, those numbers, and always ask about how is that being overseen and monitored. And then I'm really surprised, nothing against her personally, but the amount of money that we've committed to for our interim town clerk. And I'm sure Tony can say what those numbers are. And I've mentioned that at a couple of meetings already. But I do not see money for infrastructure, for many repairs. I see it in those different funds, but other than that, I've been made aware of the storm drains. Our storm drains need to be inspected, like I guess every 9 or 10 years, and we're coming up to that for our 500 storm drains, and that came from our contractor person that is doing our Portola Valley engineering. And I don't see that cost or that potential cost. Maybe it's out to bid and we don't know what the cost is yet. But my third thing is, with all of these, all these budget items and updates and finding things from different years, did we have to return any money, or did we have money that was owed to us for a very long time? Is there a bucket with those two numbers in it? And if there is, or if you could just share that information with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Anyone else? Oh, I see Craig Taylor has his hand up.
Tony, I was curious, the open space committee, I'll say volunteered, but, authorized, from their point of view, 64,000 to go into open space maintenance. It wasn't clear to me when I looked at your report, where does that end up showing up? Because at least in the open space, there's no, and it maybe just hasn't been spent yet, but I was just wondering, how does that get moved so that we basically cover that maintenance cost?
It would be spent out of the open space directly.
And do you keep track of the fact that that's sort of hanging out there?
I'll be working with Justin.
Okay, because it sort of looks like it's
Yeah.
future revenue, if you will,
Yeah.
against, you know.
Well, no,
open-
it's not going to be expensed against the general fund.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's going to come out of the open space fund directly.
Okay. And we haven't spent any of that so far?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll have to
Okay.
work with Justin.
Okay. It might be worth checking because obviously anything we've spent, so far this fiscal year, we should bill against that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Anyone else online with a comment before we take it back to the committee? Yeah, I don't see any other hands, so, oh, wait, Karen Askey.
Hello, everyone. This is first of all, I think this report is absolutely fabulous and really helpful for us all. So thank you very much, Tony and staff, in doing that. I'm putting on my Parks and Rec hat and the Rosati's parking, and I'm just wondering if the line item for parking lot and field rentals, that's where the Ford Field rental is for Zots, and then the line item for lease income parks, would that be the parking lot lease for the Alpine Inn?
Correct.
Okay, so the parking for Ford is separate from the parking for Alpine Inn Field right now.
Correct.
I mean, the
The
Rosati's
lease-
Field, excuse me. Yeah.
Right. So there's two, there's, yeah, there's that parking lot. And then there's also Ladera Oaks. Those are included in the leases.
Okay. And then the last question is very picayune, and I always ask about this, but where is that the B of A office supplies, that B of A expense that always comes up on the warrant list? Where is that getting thrown for office supplies?
Those are allocated to the department. So it'll come up under office supplies. Or whatever.
Okay.
Sometimes it's subscriptions as well. It's just depending
Okay.
on the account code, but it's allocated by department. There's not one department that houses all the credit card charges.
Okay, thank you.
I got some other questions to respond to.
Yeah, but I think we've got one more hand up that I see. Patty D, please. Is that Patty Dews? I'm not sure.
Yeah, George, it is Patty Dews. Thank you. Tony, thanks for this report. Appreciate it very much. Again, not to pile on Parks and Rec, but the line item for Zots to Tots. My understanding is that is the expense line item only because we generate, $4,000 to $5,000 in revenue from that race. So I'm assuming that revenue goes into the general fund revenue, and that line item is only the expense. If you could just clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. I don't see any other hands, so we'll bring it back to the committee, and we have responses to the various comments and also the reserve issue that was brought up earlier. Before we get into any of that, I want to also add my thanks to you, Tony, for a great report. Also for noting that the budget is balanced. We're not hemorrhaging money. We're not going to go broke. This is all extraordinary progress. Now, of course, we don't have all the resources we would like to do everything we want to do, but and we still have things to address for the longer term with respect to significant cost drivers like the public safety contract with the sheriff's office, et cetera. But this is really wonderful progress, and we should all express our gratitude here. And again, the level of detail in this mid-year review is terrific. It's exactly what we and the whole community need. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And maybe you can comment on what you can comment on from the public questions.
Okay, so the first comment was about development. Council has made it very clear that development is important to staff. But again, it's not that we're refusing to give time off. It's how can we factor in development into the workload that we're doing? For example, this week is the CSMFO conference in San Jose. I can't go because I have to do this report. I have to write my report. I can't justify going to San Jose for 8 hours when I have this report to do. And so that's a similar issue that's facing other members of staff, is getting the time off or making the time available in their workload to actually do development. But it's not a question of not wanting to do the development. It's just finding the time to make it happen. But again, council has made it very clear in November. The development is important to staff and will be going forward and will be a major component or a component of the 25-26 budget. There was a question on UUT and the telephone revenue being low. One thing that's not being, I don't believe a lot of telephone is being provided over the internet. And I don't believe the way our ordinance is written that it captures that. This is landline and small cell phone companies that are, they just see UUT ordinance, oh, okay, they got to pay UUT and then they remit it. But the fact that our UUT, or like I said, our UUT ordinance, it's a dinosaur and it needs to be updated. Rita had a question on, oh no, there was a question on encroachment permits. Encroachment permit revenue is located under licenses and permits. It's the very bottom line on general fund revenue by type. We've received over $15,000 in encroachment permits in comparison to a budget of $25,000. So we are collecting encroachment permits. Rita asked about, is there a bucket of money that we haven't had? We've had a conversation about gas tax. We will be receiving a backlog of gas tax over the last 4 fiscal years. We'll be receiving $254,000 hopefully this month or next month. The town clerk, Christine, is doing a wonderful job for us. Not only is she clerking at our council meetings, but she is getting our retention records policy up to date. She's making sure all our PRAs are being handled, codifying. So she's just, it's not just showing up at council meetings and taking minutes. She's doing a lot of work for the town, work that has fallen on the wayside. Storm drains and infrastructure, if you recall, in the revised memo, all capital projects were deferred. So that's why there's no record of capital projects in this budget. Storm drains are we have had discussions on storm drains. Yes, an assessment needs to be done. We've had conversations with Javad, who is our contract town engineer. That will be included in our capital project budget for 25-26. Again, if we have one, if we have the funding. ZOTS to TOTS, that is revenue. We received over $5,500. That's under use of money and property. That is revenue, not expense.
Yeah, Tony, I just realized that. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay.
But then I have another question on the netting of Parks and Rec. So I'll work with you offline.
Okay. Yeah, and just to answer your question, it will not be held against you. Okay.
Well, you'll be the first. Yeah,
so, no, this is an extraordinary situation, Patty, and we will work with everybody. So yeah, that's all the answers that I have.
Great, thank you very much. Let's go to discussion now, hear from the committee. There's one topic we can get onto that Bill introduced earlier, which would be reserve policy. We can talk about that now, or we can talk about other things and reserve policy. I'll open it up here for discussion. Good point.
We can't hear.
Yeah, I'll explain. Craig Taylor, Councilmember Taylor, is pointing out that we don't explicitly have reserve policy as an agenda item. So it's fine to bring it up in the context of the mid-year review and talking about our general fund reserve percentage and raise it as a question. But we probably don't want to spend a huge amount of time on it today, rather create an item in the agenda for a future meeting.
So my view on the reserve policy is that clearly what we're doing now is just holding pattern. and that the reserve policy has more implication as to what kind of tax increase, if any, that we need, or revenues that we need to raise in the future to rebuild the reserves that we need. And that's not something that we're doing right away, but when we do discuss tax increases or revenue increases in the future, not only is it a UUT rechange, but also what kind of reserves do we need to build and over what period of time?
Yeah, I think that's my opinion as well. Because as was mentioned, we're deferring capital projects. We're doing a lot of other things that are useful in the short term to balance our budget, but have to be addressed longer term.
I'm another, this is actually a question about budgeting. We used to have monthly treasurer's reports. I think we've talked about it in the past. A simple report shows beginning of month or quarter, but beginning of month balances, all the balances in the various funds. You capture that pretty quickly. New revenues that come in from all sources during the month, expenditures, warrant list, payroll, whatever, and then an ending balance. And then probably also shows where our cash is in the various funds. We had a simple report like that. I think I shared a version from 10 years ago. How close are we to being able to make some type of monthly report like that available on the website some X number of days or whatever after the end of the quarter, just to more fully inform everybody where we are?
A lot closer.
Good.
Just getting this report up to date kind of sped up that process. So, so we're a lot closer in getting, in fact, it'll look just like the fund balance summary I have. That'll be included in the process. Probably not as much detail that I have in this report, but there will be the fund balance summary, listing of revenues, expenses, and if there's any major revenue, we'll probably have a discussion about that. But the treasurer's report is just going to, here's our bank balances, here's our fund balance. And so we're a lot closer to that than we were just 2 months ago. So. And can I answer the fund balance, Bill's fund balance question? Okay, so I mean, the purpose of the fund balance, there's a few things. Number one is fiscal discipline. Number two, it's also a barometer as to where your fiscal health is as well. So yeah, it's part of long range planning conversations that I don't think this town has really had. But it will be part of the budget process that we're going to have a conversation on fund balance, because it does lead to other, where do we go from here? Do we want to just maintain fund balance at this level? Do we want to increase it? So yeah, it's going to spark some conversations as far as where the town wants to go financially.
And to be clear, you're talking about the reserve percentage.
Yes.
Fund balance. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Can we live with this, or does it need to be higher or lower or whatever? Yeah.
So I'll just offer this because I have it right in front of me. So the minimum fund balance policy was adopted by the town council in 2011, and it's a one-sentence purpose statement. The purpose of this policy is to establish a target minimum level of unreserved and spendable fund balance to be maintained in the general fund for use by the town council in the event of natural disaster, severe unforeseen emergencies, economic uncertainties, and/or replacement of major town infrastructure. Going and actually comparing that to the fund balance summary, which is page 6 in this package, there's nomenclature I think is important. So this says specifically unreserved and spendable, but the way we have the fund balance, it has the unassigned. And then within the unassigned, then there's assigned, and then there's restricted. I think restricted is that's the one that makes perfect sense. That's the one that I think, at least in my mind, is a bit ambiguous, is what does unreserved and spendable mean as it relates to the unassigned or no, the general purpose fund, and whether, because there are different words and I don't know exactly how to map it, because Bill, the calculations that you had made, you used as the numerator, the full 1.9 million over the 7.4 million total expense. You got to like 25%, whereas the minimum fund balance says 60%. But in fact, if you use that's if you use that full numerator. If you use a much smaller numerator, which is the unassigned, and if you make the equivalency of unassigned to be meaning unreserved, it's actually even smaller. So I'll just point that out because that will be a discussion I think we should have in a more fulsome period later.
Yeah, and I can just weigh in with some history on that. We've had this conversation in the past, many years ago, when we talked about reserve balances, and it was determined at that time that assignment is just a marker the town council puts at its discretion that it can remove at any point. And so from a reserve standpoint, assignments are, it's a bit like me saying, well, I'm reserving this money in my bank account for my new car I want to buy in a year, but I can change my mind. And so therefore it should not count against the reserve, unlike say restricted funds where you legally should not be spending them except for the purpose they're restricted for. More discussion of the budget?
Just a question on, this may be a timing issue too with the summer coming up, but the lease income for the parks is minimal to date.
Right.
Is that timing?
Yeah, we'll do an annual, so we'll just send a bill in June.
And so the full 60,000 is.
We'll realize it then. Yeah, there's certain components that it's an annual payment or it's a monthly payment or it's a quarterly payment. So.
What are the next big milestones in your budget year? We mentioned in a month, we've got some audit stuff to go through. Then we have to begin working on the next fiscal year budget. What are the next?
Correct. So next month, council will be going over the priorities. And once those are finalized, then we'll have council will have a couple of study sessions, one on expenses, one on revenues. We're also going to have a couple of road shows or a community hall, I should say. Again, revenue and expenses. Then that'll be for the residents. And then also in preparation for those study sessions, have one with the finance committee as well. Just how I'm getting to these numbers and what makes them up. To kind of walk you through the process, and then also would invite the finance committee to be part of the community halls as well. And also the budget study sessions as well, to offer some input and guidance. So that's pretty much going to be March through April. May, there will be a check-in with council, just putting everything together. Here's where we are, give us some more direction. And then hopefully having not hopefully, but having the budget adopted the first council meeting in June.
So it sounds like March, April, going to be pretty busy.
Yes.
Hey, Tony, at the last finance committee meeting, you shared your budget calendar and council priorities update, and you had a proposed schedule.
Yes.
Is that schedule
That's
tracking? Has it
that's a
been
draft.
adopted?
That was a draft. But today going over the council meeting schedule, the priorities and goals won't be ratified until March, the second meeting in March. So that's kind of the once we have council goals, then we can start the process of developing the budget.
So do you plan to issue an updated schedule?
Yes.
Okay, when will that come out?
Soon.
And I mean, to me, it's not just Tony doing the work, it's town
I'll
council.
probably have
dedicating the
something,
time,
I'll
right?
probably have something at the 26th meeting.
All right, I'm
So-
more interested that town council is held accountable for their deliverables on your
Right.
budget. It's not just finance department's
Oh, no,
job to develop
it's
a
all me.
budget.
It's all
town-
me.
Yeah, Good luck with that.
And we'll obviously have to schedule more meetings of this committee.
Yes.
Yeah. When might you have enough information for us to work on that? Would that not be today, but we can take that offline? Is that?
We have an offline conversation.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, sir. Please, yeah. Councilmember Taylor would like to speak.
So just, Chris, so you know, the delay is on the first meeting in March. We're going to have a study session on the priorities, and then we're going to finalize them on the last one. Because we realized if we tried to do it all in one meeting of actually discussing where we were and then trying to finalize, it would just be chaos. So it's not that we moved the finalization back to that lower one, but we're starting at the same time. Which I know isn't great, but it just, you know, it's the time we have.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised, right?
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah.
even refer to it as a delay, Craig. I think that, I think Tony, as the finance lead, said, hey, this is what I would like to do. But you know, what I was saying was, well, it's a town council plus finance committee, finance department have to agree.
Right.
So it sounds like you've agreed
Yes.
on the
and
key
that's what-
milestones and you've got a plan and we're executing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great news.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, no, I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah.
We took Tony's input, but
Right.
then we needed to sort of schedule it in a way we could make it work. So, yeah,
It's
but
rational.
we're working, yeah, exactly. But we're
Yeah.
working together, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, we're not just expecting Tony to pull this magically out of the air for us.
I
Yeah,
think,
great.
all right.
A- As I stated in the last meeting, the June 6th meeting will, or this first meeting in June will not be the first time everybody sees the budget. There's going to be multiple opportunities for community, council, finance, everybody to see, review, comment. And because, I mean, it's what this town needs for its future is a very big discussion.
Yep, great.
And we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a big body of work, right? It's not just a budget. It's setting priorities and strategies.
Is the new budget likely to include the output of the fee study that we commissioned?
Yes, if it's completed. We're looking at getting them just to do the fee study first and then the Nexus study, if they can bifurcate that, then hopefully we'll have the fee study in time for when the fee study gets adopted. If we don't, we're just going to take the current fee study, add the CPI kickers and have that in place. That way we can assess fees. And then when we get the fee study back, amend the fee study or the fee schedule once we have. a
And that can be
comprehensive-
done whenever.
That can be
it's-
done whenever. Yeah.
So Tony, just to clarify.
Yeah.
So now you believe that you will be able to update next year's budget with the output from the fee study?
That's the plan, that's the goal,
Right,
but
last
again,
meeting-
it's, you know, I'm doing budget, doing audit.
Yeah, I got you, man.
So I mean, something might give. and
Yeah, I
it
just,
might be the
the
fee
only
study.
reason, the only reason I'm
Yeah.
saying that is last meeting you said you did not expect that. So that's progress.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, so that's great. All right. I mean, I think it's time we updated fees. What one committee member's opinion is
Right.
we should update fees and not be operating off of old fees. So, you know, anything we can do to do that would be beneficial to our budget.
I mean, best practice is every 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
More comments? All right, I don't hear anything else. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
I'll
So moved.
second.
Okay, in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No, okay, we're adjourned at 5:24.